You mean to tell me that humans have been doing what with their genetic code? High Scholar Zixtal's fourth appendage trembled as they reviewed the latest research findings, causing ripples in their bioluminescent membrane. Apparently, they've been deliberately scrambling it for entertainment, replied Research Director Venna, their crystalline epidermis clouding with concern. They call it selective breeding, and have been doing it for what they term millennia, primarily to create variants of other species that they find aesthetically pleasing. The two Chintari scientists floated in their meditation chamber aboard the Galactic Council's premier research vessel, the Eternal Truth Seeker, currently in orbit around the peculiar planet called Earth. What had started as a routine first-contact observation mission had quickly evolved into something that threatened to upend the entire Council's understanding of galactic evolution. But that's impossible, Zixtal protested, their bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. No species develops genetic manipulation capabilities before achieving faster-than-light travel. It's one of the fundamental axioms of evolutionary progression. That's not even the most disturbing part, Venina continued, bringing up a holographic display of various Earth creatures. Look at these specimens. The humans call them dogs. According to our genetic analysis, they all descended from a single predator species in just a few thousand years. The images showed creatures ranging from tiny, flat-faced companions to massive, muscular guardians. Some had excessive fur, others barely any. The variation was staggering and completely unnatural. By the eternal void, Zixtal whispered, their usual academic composure cracking. They were performing advanced genetic engineering before they even understood what genes were. Exactly. And it gets worse. Venina's crystalline surface rippled with dark patterns of distress. They didn't stop at other species. They've been inadvertently modifying their own genome through something they call artificial selection for just as long. The holographic display shifted to show human historical data. Agricultural practices, urbanization patterns, and technological development timelines floated before them in a damning sequence. They built civilization itself around genetic manipulation, Zixtal realized, their fourth appendage now completely still with shock. Their entire food supply consists of species they've modified to suit their needs. These crops barely resemble their original forms. And they did it all by simply choosing which organisms got to reproduce. No gene splicing, no molecular restructuring, just patience and persistence. Venna's voice carried a note of horrified admiration. They've been practicing evolutionary engineering since before they invented the wheel. The two scientists fell into troubled silence, watching the blue-green planet rotate below them. Humans had been admitted to the Galactic Council just 3 standard cycles ago, classified as a juvenile species, due to their relatively recent achievement of faster-than-light travel. The classification was proving to be one of the greatest mistakes in Council history. We need to update their classification immediately, Zixtal declared, already composing an emergency transmission to the Council. They're not juvenile at all. They're something else entirely. What do you mean? Venna asked, though their crystalline structure suggested they already knew the answer. Think about it. Every spacefaring species we've encountered achieved genetic engineering capabilities. After developing quantum computing and FTL travel, it's considered a natural progression. First you master the physical sciences, then biology, then psychology. But humans. Zixtal's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. Humans started with biology. They've been manipulating the fundamental building blocks of life for their entire recorded history. You don't think... Yes. We've been looking at this all wrong. Humans aren't a young species that recently achieved spaceflight. They're an ancient species that took an entirely different path to the stars. Zixtal's appendages waved in agitation. While we were focusing on physics and mathematics, they were mastering life itself through trial and error. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council had classified humans as primitive because they had only recently developed the technology considered standard for advanced civilizations. But they had completely overlooked the humans' casual mastery of biological engineering, a field that most species only began to explore after centuries of spaceflight. We need to warn the Council, Venna said, their crystalline surface now a swirling mass of worried patterns. The humans' classification as a juvenile species has led many to underestimate them. Some have even suggested they might make good client species for more advanced civilizations. Zixtal's bioluminescence flashed in alarm. That would be catastrophic. Any attempt to patronize or control them would be like children trying to teach their ancestors. We're not dealing with newcomers to galactic civilization. We're dealing with biological engineers who have been practicing their craft since before most of our species achieved sentience. The holographic display shifted again, showing images of Earth's vast cities, its complex ecosystems, and its bewildering variety of domesticated species. Each image now carried new weight. These weren't the achievements of a young species stumbling toward the stars, but the work of ancient biological architects who had shaped their entire world to suit their needs. Look at how they treat their pets, Venna observed, bringing up images of humans with their various animal companions. We thought it was primitive pack-bonding behavior, but it's actually something far more sophisticated. They've created perfectly customized companion species, each adapted to fill different emotional and practical needs. And they did it all through intuitive understanding of genetic principles, before they even had a word for DNA, Zixtal added. It's like they're native speakers of the language of life itself, while the rest of us are still struggling with basic grammar. The emergency transmission to the Council was nearly complete, but Zixtal hesitated before sending it. How do you think they'll react? The humans, I mean, when they realize their true position in the galactic community. Venna's crystalline surface showed patterns of wry amusement. They probably already know. Haven't you noticed how they react to our advanced biological technology? They're not impressed. They're politely interested, like adults watching children show off basic arithmetic. By the void, you're right, Zixtal realized. Remember last cycle when the Morenthi demonstrated their latest advancement in cellular regeneration? The humans just nodded and mentioned something about how they'd been doing something similar with salamanders for centuries. Exactly. We've been so focused on their primitive technology that we missed the fact that they've achieved through patience and observation what most species require advanced computers to accomplish. Venna's crystalline surface rippled with something approaching admiration. They're not junior members of galactic civilization. They're the biological elder race we never knew we had. Zixtal finally sent the transmission, their bioluminescence pulsing with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The Council's not going to like this. The entire classification system will need to be revised. We can't simply measure advancement by technological achievements anymore, not when humans have demonstrated that there are entirely different paths to mastery of the universe. Perhaps that's exactly what we needed, Venna suggested. We've become too dependent on our technology, too convinced that there's only one path to advancement. The humans. They show us that there are other ways. Slower, perhaps, more intuitive, but no less valid. As if to punctuate their discussion, a new transmission arrived from Earth. It was a routine update on human genetic research, but now Zixtal and Venna read it with new eyes. What had seemed like primitive experiments now revealed themselves as the work of master artisans, honing techniques perfected over thousands of generations. You know what the really disturbing part is? Venna said after a moment. Now that they do have access to advanced technology, now that they can combine their intuitive understanding of biological systems with modern tools, what do you think they'll be capable of? Zixtal's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. I suppose we're about to find out. The Council's response just arrived. They're upgrading humanity's classification immediately and requesting a full species-wide conference. How are they handling it? About as well as you'd expect, given that we just informed them that we've accidentally invited the galaxy's premier biological engineers to join as a junior member. Zixtal's appendages waved in what might have been amusement, though I suspect the humans will be gracious about it. They seem to have a surprising amount of patience with younger species. The two scientists continued their observation of Earth, but now with very different eyes. Below them, millions of years of careful biological engineering continued to unfold, guided by the casual mastery of a species that had been shaping life itself since before they understood exactly how they were doing it. The humans had never needed faster-than-light travel to prove their advancement. They had already reshaped their world, molecule by molecule, generation by generation, creating new forms of life through sheer persistence and intuition. They weren't latecomers to galactic civilization. They were the master practitioners of the oldest science, finally stepping onto a larger stage. And as Zixtal and Venina watched a human child playing with a carefully engineered companion animal, they couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Earth's elder race had in store for the galaxy. After all, they were only just beginning to combine their ancient knowledge with modern technology. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere on Earth, a human was probably explaining to their dog how silly it was that it took the aliens so long to figure it out. The Galactic Council's emergency session was already in its fourth standard rotation when High Counselor Naztul finally called for order. The massive crystalline chamber, designed to accommodate representatives of over 300 species, hummed with an undercurrent of agitation that even the most sophisticated harmonic dampeners couldn't quite suppress. The findings from research vessel Eternal Truthseeker have been verified, Nazatoul announced, their energy form flickering with what could only be described as bureaucratic distress. We must now address the implications of humanity's unique developmental path. Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth sat quietly in what had previously been designated as the Junior Species Observation Gallery, trying not to look too amused. The humans had suspected something like this might happen eventually, but they hadn't expected it to cause quite so much confusion among their galactic neighbors. With all due respect, High Counselor, the Mernthi representative's translator crackled. Are we seriously suggesting that a species which hasn't even mastered quantum gravitational manipulation should be reclassified as an elder race? Sarah cleared her throat politely. Perhaps I could offer some clarification? The chamber fell silent as she stood. The Junior Species Gallery had never been used to address the full council before. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their various forms of locomotion or suspension. While it's true that humanity hasn't achieved the same level of physical sciences mastery as many council members, Sarah began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. We've had other priorities. For instance, would anyone care to guess how many distinct canine breeds Earth currently maintains? According to our latest survey, the Chintari research director Venna offered, approximately 400 recognized variants with countless regional subspecies. Actually, it's closer to 450 now, Sarah corrected gently. We added a few new breeds last month. Lovely little things called Buer Terriers. Very good with children. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated exclamations and concerned harmonic vibrations. You're still actively modifying species? A gaseous entity near the center of the chamber demanded, its translator struggling to convey its shock. Of course, Sarah replied, as if discussing nothing more remarkable than the weather. We've been doing it so long it's practically a hobby now. Did you know we recently developed a type of rice that can grow in salt water? The implications for food security in coastal regions are quite exciting. High Counselor Nazatoul's energy form pulsed rapidly. Ambassador Chen, are you saying that humans routinely modify the genetic structures of living organisms for recreation? Among other things, yes. Sarah pulled up a holographic display of her own. This is Mr. Whiskers, by the way. He's my cat. Well, technically, he's a Maine Coon, which is a breed we developed to survive harsh winter conditions while maintaining a friendly disposition. We did that one back when we still thought the world was flat. The chamber went very, very quiet. You engineered a specialized cold-weather predator companion before developing basic astronomical knowledge? The Mernthi representative's translator seemed to be having trouble processing the concept. Oh, that's nothing, Sarah continued cheerfully. You should see what we did with pigeons. We made them into message carriers, food sources, and show animals. Some of them can even do backflips in mid-flight. That was mostly just because we thought it would look neat. The Arcturian delegation, normally the very model of composed deliberation, was showing distinct signs of cognitive distress. But how? One of them managed to articulate. Without quantum computers? Without molecular restructuring arrays? Trial and error, mostly, Sarah explained. Lots and lots of careful breeding programs. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with a few thousand years of patience and good record-keeping. Speaking of which, has anyone here tried Earth wheat? The modern stuff, I mean. Not the original grass variety we started with about 10,000 years ago. Several council members who had indeed sampled Earth's grain products suddenly looked at their refreshment synthesizers with new understanding and no small amount of concern. Ambassador Chen, High Counselor Nazatoul interjected, their energy form now stabilizing into what might have been resignation. I believe I speak for the entire council when I say that we may have significantly misunderstood humanity's technological progression. Oh, that's quite all right, Sarah assured them. We're used to it. Actually, we have a term for this sort of situation. Hiding in plain sight. Though I should mention that now that we have access to your genetic sequencing technology, our progress has accelerated quite a bit. Did you know we've already adapted some of your medical nanites to work with Earth's extremophile bacteria? The applications for environmental cleanup are fascinating. This time, the chamber's harmonic dampeners gave up entirely as the collective shock of 300 species created a resonance cascade that briefly caused the architectural crystals to sing in harmony. You've modified our nanite technology? The Muranthi representative's translator seemed to be developing a stutter. "Well, yes," Sarah replied, checking her notes. "Oh, and before I forget, we've also been meaning to discuss some potential improvements to the Council's standard terraforming protocols. We noticed a few inefficiencies in the biological integration sequences. Nothing major, just some suggestions based on our experience with rapid adaptation engineering. We have 10,000 years of agricultural data that might be relevant." High Counselor Naztul's energy form flickered in what might have been a sigh. "I believe, Ambassador Chen, that the Council would be very interested in humanity's suggestions." "Wonderful," Sarah beamed. "I've already prepared a preliminary report, though I should warn you, it's rather lengthy. We humans can be a bit thorough when it comes to documenting our biological engineering projects. Old habits, you understand." As the council chamber descended into a mixture of scientific excitement and existential crisis, Sarah quietly sent a message back to Earth. "They finally figured it out. You owe me a coffee, Dave. And yes, they reacted exactly like we thought they would when I mentioned the cats." Somewhere in Geneva, the head of Earth's Xenobiological Relations Department read the message and chuckled. He looked down at his own cat, a recently developed hypoallergenic variety that could purr in perfect pitch, and wondered how long it would take the Council to realize that humanity's casual approach to genetic engineering was just the beginning. After all, they hadn't even asked about the dogs that could understand basic mathematics yet. Some revelations, he decided, were best saved for later. The galaxy wasn't quite ready to learn that humans had basically been running a 10,000-year beta test of biological engineering. Besides, it was much more fun to watch them figure it out on their own. The aftermath of the council session proved even more interesting than the revelation itself. Within days, research requests from every major galactic institution began flooding Earth's newly established Office of Xenobiological Relations. The various alien species, having moved past their initial shock, were now displaying an almost childlike enthusiasm to learn from humanity's vast experience in biological engineering. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in her laboratory at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, explaining basic concepts of selective breeding to a group of highly advanced alien scientists who had mastered quantum mechanics but somehow never considered that you could just choose which organisms get to reproduce. "So you're telling us," Professor Kalax of the Centaurian Science Academy said, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement, "that you created this entire species of plant purely by selecting for desired traits over multiple generations?" Elena looked at the corn plant she was holding, a perfectly ordinary specimen of Zea mays, and tried not to smile too broadly. "Well, yes, although technically we created it from teosinte grass. Took a few thousand years, but who's counting?" The assembled aliens made various sounds of astonishment in their respective communication methods. "But the genetic modifications required," another scientist began, "were all done through careful observation and record-keeping," Elena finished. "Though I should mention that my grandmother could tell which plants would produce the best yield just by looking at them. We still don't fully understand how she did it. Some combination of pattern recognition built up over decades of experience, we think." The aliens' recording devices whirred frantically as they documented this apparently revolutionary concept. Meanwhile, in Kenya, Dr. James Kamani was having a similar conversation about cattle breeding with a different group of alien researchers. "You mean to tell me," the Andromedan xenobiologist was saying, "that humans have been maintaining detailed genealogical records of their food animals since before they invented writing?" "Of course," James replied, gesturing to the healthy herd of Ankole cattle grazing nearby. "How else would we keep track of which bloodlines produce the best traits? My family has been maintaining these herds for generations. We can trace some of these cattle's ancestors back further than our own human family tree." The aliens looked at each other with what might have been embarrassment. They had spent centuries developing computer models to optimize livestock genetics, while humans had been doing it by memory and oral tradition since before they built their first cities. Back in Geneva, Dave Thompson was dealing with a different kind of crisis. The Galactic Council's Biology and Ethics Committee had just discovered the existence of dog shows. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," the committee chair's hologram said, its translated voice carrying a note of desperate confusion. "Humans regularly gather to competitively display the results of their genetic engineering projects?" "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds a bit formal," Dave replied, scratching behind the ears of his award-winning border collie. "We just call it a dog show. Would you like to see her trick? She can solve simple quadratic equations." The committee chair's hologram flickered in what might have been distress. You engineered companion animals capable of mathematical computation. For entertainment. Oh no, that was an accident, Dave assured them. We were just trying to breed for intelligence and problem-solving abilities. The math thing was a surprise, though I should mention she's terrible at calculus. We're working on that in the next generation. The committee's collective response had to be filtered through several layers of harmonic dampeners before it was safe for human hearing. In orbit, aboard the Eternal Truth Seeker, High Scholar Zixtal and Research Director Venina were reviewing the latest data from Earth with a mixture of awe and professional envy. Look at this, Venna said, displaying a hologram of human agricultural records. They've been systematically modifying their food crops for specific environmental conditions since before they understood what the environment was. There's evidence of drought-resistant grain varieties being developed during something they call the Bronze Age. That's nothing, Zixtal replied. Have you seen their records on something called cheese making? They've been maintaining specialized microorganism cultures for thousands of years. They deliberately encourage specific bacterial and fungal growths on their food, for flavor. They what? Apparently they consider it a delicacy. Some of these bacterial cultures have been continuously maintained for centuries. They pass them down through generations like we pass down quantum equations. The two scientists contemplated this in silence for a moment. You know what the really extraordinary thing is? Venna finally said. They're still going. Even with access to our technology, they're continuing their traditional breeding programs alongside the new techniques. Something about not putting all their eggs in one basket. Though I'm still trying to understand why they would put eggs in baskets in the first place. It's a metaphor, Zixtal explained. They have a lot of those, often involving their various engineered species. Did you know they have over 50 different expressions involving dogs alone? Back on Earth, Sarah Chen was preparing for another council session. This time, she had been asked to explain humanity's apparent casual mastery of microbiome engineering, as evidenced by their millennia-old traditions of fermentation. Should I tell them about sourdough starters? She mused to her assistant. Or would that just confuse them more? Maybe we should wait on that one, the assistant suggested. They're still trying to process the concept of yogurt. Finding out that humans have been maintaining specific bacterial cultures in their kitchens for generations might be a bit much right now. Sarah nodded sagely. You're probably right, though we should probably warn them about kimchi before someone tries to scan a Korean restaurant and thinks they've discovered a biological weapons facility. As she prepared her notes, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. Humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars for signs of advanced alien life, only to discover that they had been the advanced aliens all along. They just hadn't realized it because their advancement had taken such a different path. The galaxy was still adjusting to this revelation, but humans, true to form, were taking it all in stride. After all, when you've spent 10,000 years casually reshaping life itself to suit your needs, a little interstellar confusion hardly seems worth getting excited about. Besides, they still hadn't told the Council about their plans for terraforming Mars using engineered lichens and bacteria. Some things they had decided were best introduced gradually. The galaxy might need a few more centuries to get used to humanity's particular brand of biological innovation. And somewhere in a lab in Geneva, a border collie was working on her calculus, blissfully unaware that she represented one of the most impressive feats of biological engineering in galactic history. She was more concerned with the treat she'd get if she solved the equation correctly. Some things, after all, never change, no matter how advanced the species involved might be. The Galactic Council's annual Science and Technology Summit was being held on Earth this year, a decision that had raised more than a few crystalline eyebrows among the more traditionally minded member species. The chosen venue was a centuries-old botanical garden in Singapore, which the human organizers had thought would make a fitting statement about their heritage of biological engineering. Dr. Mei Wang, the head of Earth's newly established Institute for Xenobiological Integration, stood at the podium addressing a diverse audience of alien scientists and diplomats. Behind her, a vast wall of carefully cultivated vertical gardens demonstrated humanity's mastery over plant growth in ways that no technological display could match. As we begin this historic summit, she began, I think it's important to address what some have called the technological gap between Earth and other Council members. However, I suggest we reframe this discussion. It's not a gap. It's a different path entirely. The assembled beings shifted in their various forms of seating, sensing that another paradigm-shifting revelation was about to occur. For instance, May continued, gesturing to the living wall behind her, these plants represent over 40 different species, each carefully adapted to thrive in vertical growing conditions. We developed most of them before we had electricity. Some of you have asked how this was possible without genetic sequencing technology. The answer is simple. We didn't need to know the exact genetic sequence to understand how traits were inherited. A Rigelian scientist raised one of their sensory appendages, but without molecular modeling, how could you predict the outcomes? May smiled. We didn't predict, we observed. We kept records. We learned from our failures. And most importantly, we were patient. Humanity's greatest technological advancement might be our ability to think in terms of generations rather than immediate results. Meanwhile, in a research facility in New Zealand, another kind of revelation was taking place. Dr. James Miller was showing a group of alien biotechnology experts something they had initially mistaken for advanced terraforming equipment. This, he said, pointing to a paddock of sheep, is one of our oldest and most successful biological engineering projects. We modified these animals to produce clothing material. You mean you developed a biological factory for textile production? One of the aliens asked, their translator struggling to convey their excitement. Well, we just call it sheep farming, James replied. Been doing it for about 12,000 years now, though I should mention these particular sheep are a bit special. They're part of our carbon sequestration program. Their wool has been modified to absorb atmospheric pollutants. The aliens' recording devices nearly overloaded trying to document this casual mention of combining ancient animal husbandry with modern environmental engineering. In orbit, aboard the newly commissioned research vessel, Biological Heritage, a joint human-alien research team was making another fascinating discovery. According to these records, senior researcher Tilan announced, their phosphorescent form pulsing with excitement. Humans began developing specialized symbiotic relationships with microorganisms for food preservation before they understood that microorganisms existed. Oh, you mean fermentation? Dr. Sarah Martinez replied, looking up from her analysis of alien bacterial cultures. Yes, every human culture developed their own versions. My grandmother had a sourdough starter that was older than our country. The bacteria had adapted specifically to our local climate over generations. Talon's glow dimmed slightly in thought. You maintained specialized bacterial colonies as a cultural tradition? Of course. How else would you make bread? Sarah paused, noting the alien's confusion. Would you like to see something really interesting? We've been experimenting with combining traditional fermentation techniques with your species' bacterial strains. The results are quite remarkable. Back on Earth, the Galactic Council's Biology and Ethics Committee was facing yet another conceptual crisis. They had just discovered the existence of aquaponics. Let us understand this correctly, the committee chair said, staring at the complex ecosystem before them. Humans developed a sustainable, closed-loop system combining aquatic animal husbandry with plant cultivation. As a hobby? Well, initially it was for food production, explained Dr. Ahmed Rahman, leading them through his extensive home setup. But yes, many people now do it recreationally. My children use it for their science projects. Would you like to see their latest experiment? They're teaching the fish to respond to different colored lights. The committee's collective response had to be translated through 3 different AI systems before it became comprehensible. At the Singapore summit, Dr. Wang was concluding her presentation with what she knew would be the most shocking revelation yet. And finally, she said, we come to what might be our most ambitious project to date. As you know, humanity has begun assisting with various council terraforming projects. What you might not know is that we've been preparing for planetary terraforming since before we knew other planets existed. The audience erupted in a chaos of translated questions and exclamations. Our ancestors, May continued once order was restored, developed techniques for modifying ecosystems on a massive scale through careful observation and intentional species management. They didn't call it terraforming, of course. They called it agriculture. But the principles are the same. And now that we have access to advanced technology, we've been able to adapt these ancient techniques to an interplanetary scale. She brought up a holographic display showing various Earth organisms that had been modified for extraterrestrial conditions. These are descendants of organisms that humans first began modifying during our Stone Age. We've simply continued the process. The lichens you see here are designed to survive on Mars. The bacteria are adapted for Venus's upper atmosphere. And these algae? They're intended for Europa's subsurface oceans. The summit hall fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just been practicing biological engineering throughout their history. They had been preparing, unknowingly, for galactic-scale ecosystem manipulation since before they built their first cities. In Geneva, the Office of Xenobiological Relations was preparing for the inevitable flood of new research requests that would follow Dr. Wang's presentation. They had already set up a special division just to handle questions about traditional fermentation techniques, and another to deal with inquiries about human intuitive understanding of genetic inheritance patterns. Sarah Chen, now promoted to Director of Interspecies Scientific Cooperation, was reviewing the latest batch of collaboration proposals when an urgent message arrived from the Galactic Council. They want to know if we'd be willing to head up a new division focusing on biological engineering approaches to space exploration, her assistant reported. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Tell them we accept. But they might want to brace themselves. Wait until they find out we've been accidentally preparing for space colonization since we first started cultivating mushrooms. As the message was sent, somewhere in a research lab in Singapore, a group of human scientists was already working on the next generation of space-adapted organisms, combining ancient breeding techniques with modern genetic technology in ways that their galactic colleagues were only beginning to understand. And in a small garden somewhere, a child was carefully selecting which tomato plants to save seeds from for next year's crop, carrying on a tradition of biological engineering that was older than human civilization itself, and now, finally, recognized for the remarkable achievement it truly was. The galaxy was learning, slowly but surely, that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't technology at all. Sometimes it's just patience, observation, and the quiet persistence of countless generations, each making small improvements that add up to something revolutionary. Humanity had never needed faster-than-light travel to prove their advancement. They had been advancing all along, one carefully selected seed, one bred animal, one cultured bacterium at a time. The stars had always been their destination. They had just taken a different path to reach them. And now, as they shared their knowledge with their galactic neighbors, they were discovering that perhaps their greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their ability to manipulate genes or engineer ecosystems, but their understanding that the most powerful changes often come not from sudden technological leaps, but from the patient, persistent guidance of life itself. The Galactic Council's archive of scientific achievement, a vast repository of knowledge spanning thousands of species and millions of years, was undergoing its most significant reorganization in recorded history. The cause? The human concept of folk knowledge, and its unexpected implications for advanced biological engineering. Chief Archivist Zelthurian, whose species had evolved from crystalline matrices and who took particular pride in precise categorical organization, was facing an unprecedented challenge. "You're telling me," they said to Dr. Isabella Martinez of Earth's Traditional Knowledge Integration Department, "that crucial biological engineering principles have been preserved in your species' children's songs?" Isabella nodded, pulling up a holographic display of traditional nursery rhymes from various Earth cultures. Take this one, for example. It's a simple song about planting beans, but encoded within the lyrics are precise instructions about soil conditions, planting depth, and seasonal timing. Our ancestors wrapped complex agricultural knowledge in memorable rhymes to ensure it would be passed down accurately through generations. The chief archivist's crystalline form vibrated in what might have been existential distress. "We've been categorizing human technological development all wrong. Your species wasn't developing technology sequentially. You were developing multiple advanced disciplines simultaneously, simply expressing them through different cultural mechanisms." "Exactly," Isabella confirmed. "While we were developing written language, we were also conducting multi-generational genetic engineering experiments. We just didn't call it that. We called it farming or animal husbandry or brewing." Meanwhile, at the newly established Center for Convergent Evolution Studies in Nairobi, another paradigm-shifting discovery was taking place. Dr. Samuel Okafor was explaining something that had the assembled alien scientists in a state of near panic. Yes, different human cultures independently developed similar biological engineering techniques on different continents, he explained, displaying archaeological evidence of parallel agricultural developments. Without contact with each other, human populations around the world figured out how to modify plants and animals for their needs, often arriving at surprisingly similar solutions. But that suggests an innate species-wide capability for biological engineering, one of the alien scientists protested, their atmospheric containment field flickering with agitation. "Precisely," Samuel agreed. "It seems humans have a natural intuition for biological systems. We're still not entirely sure why, though it might explain our species' peculiar ability to form symbiotic relationships with almost any Earth species we encounter." In orbit, aboard the research vessel Eternal Truth Seeker, High Scholar Zixtal was reviewing the latest findings with mounting amazement. The humans had just shared their complete historical records of plant and animal domestication, and the implications were staggering. "Look at this," they said to Research Director Venna, displaying a timeline of human agricultural development. "They didn't just modify individual species, they created entirely new ecosystems. These farms of theirs are actually highly engineered biological systems, developed through careful observation and selective pressure over thousands of years." "That's not even the most remarkable part," Venna replied, bringing up their own analysis. "According to these records, humans regularly created these artificial ecosystems in environments where they shouldn't have been possible. They engineered both the organisms and the environmental conditions simultaneously." Back on Earth, the Galactic Council's Committee for Advanced Technologies was having difficulty processing their latest discovery. They had just learned about the existence of bonsai trees. "Let us be absolutely clear," the committee chair said, staring at the ancient miniature tree before them. "Humans developed the ability to control and modify plant growth patterns on a cellular level. For aesthetic purposes? Well, it's more of an art form, really," explained Master Tanaka Hiroshi, 10th generation bonsai artist. "Each tree is a collaboration between human and plant, shaped by both traditional techniques and the plant's natural growth patterns. Some of these techniques have been refined over thousands of years." The committee's collective consciousness had to take a brief recess to process this information. In Geneva, at the headquarters of the newly formed Interstellar Biological Heritage Organization, Sarah Chen was preparing for another revolutionary announcement. The human scientific community had finally decided it was time to reveal their latest project, the comprehensive database of Earth's traditional biological engineering techniques. "We call it the Heritage Seed Bank," she explained to the assembled Galactic Press Corps. "It's not just a collection of genetic material. It's a record of human biological engineering achievements spanning our entire history. Every domesticated plant, every bred animal, every cultured microorganism, along with the traditional knowledge and techniques used to develop them." The alien journalist's recording devices hummed with activity as she continued. "But here's the truly exciting part," Sarah said, bringing up a holographic display of the database's structure. "We've cross-referenced these traditional techniques with modern genetic science, creating a bridge between intuitive and technological approaches to biological engineering. The applications for space colonization and terraforming are, well, let's just say we're only beginning to scratch the surface." The implications weren't lost on anyone present. Humanity hadn't just preserved their biological engineering heritage. They had created a framework for combining ancient wisdom with modern technology in ways that could revolutionize galactic civilization's approach to life sciences. At that very moment, in laboratories and research centers across Earth and in orbital stations, human scientists were working alongside their alien colleagues, teaching them something that humanity had known instinctively for millennia: that the key to mastering biological engineering wasn't just understanding the mechanics of life, but developing a deep, intuitive relationship with living systems themselves. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's primitive approach to biological engineering wasn't primitive at all. It was simply operating on a different level of sophistication, one that had developed through countless generations of careful observation and interaction with life itself. And as the various species of the Galactic Council struggled to integrate this new understanding into their technological worldview, humans continued doing what they had always done: patiently observing, carefully selecting, and gradually guiding the development of life in new and interesting directions. After all, they had been doing it since before they built their first cities. The only difference now was that they had an entire galaxy of new species to work with, and this time, they didn't need to wait generations to see results. Though, as any experienced human biological engineer would tell you, sometimes the old ways were still the best. The future of galactic biological engineering would be a synthesis of approaches: the patient, intuitive methods developed by humanity over millennia, combined with the advanced technology of their galactic neighbors. And somehow that seemed entirely appropriate. After all, as humanity had shown, the most profound advances often came not from rushing forward, but from carefully building on the wisdom of the past. And somewhere, in a small garden on Earth, another child was learning the ancient arts of selective breeding and cultivation, carrying forward a tradition that was now recognized as one of the most sophisticated scientific achievements in galactic history. The future of biological engineering would be built on such moments. The careful observation of life, passed down from generation to generation, now expanded to encompass the stars themselves. The galaxy would never be quite the same. But then again, change and adaptation had always been at the heart of humanity's approach to life itself. They had just never expected their particular form of patience to become one of the most valuable scientific resources in the known universe. The end.